The wind moved through the herb pots of the upper terrace garden, carrying rosemary and dried kelp grass and something sweet beneath them both. Clay pots crowded the edge of the headwoman's rooftop, dense with winter herbs, and a single persimmon tree clung to its last 3 fruits against a sky-streaked amber and violet. 2 moons were rising, pale as bone, and far below the island the cloud sea glowed rose gold. The persimmon tree dropped 1 leaf. It spiraled down and vanished into the clouds. Jalle Orend stood with his hand still lifted in the air, caught mid-sentence. He had not lowered it. He looked like a man who had begun to open a door and discovered there was no room on the other side. Nuri Toumachi waited with the patience of someone who had waited longer than Jalle knew, and was no longer willing to be gentle about it. "You were going to say something," she said, quiet and precise. "Something real. I would like to hear it." The amber light shifted. Slowly, Jalle's hand came down. He chose his words the way a person chooses where to set a foot in the dark. "I know the difference between nitrogen exhaustion and soil blight because I have seen both fail a crop, that is all." "That is not what I asked." She turned to face him then, and hers was the face of a woman who had run a village for 19 years through 2 droughts, a trade embargo, and a succession crisis the mainland records did not mention. It was not an unkind face, it was a face that had decided. "Where did you see them fail?" Something shifted beneath the careful surface of his expression, like a movement under ice. "Different islands," he answered, too evenly, the control itself audible. "I have moved around." The patience in her broke open into something warmer and more dangerous, not accusation, but the tenderness of someone calling a hidden thing by its name. "Jalle, I've welcomed strangers to this island for 31 years. I know the ones who are running from something, I know the ones who are hiding something, and once, only once, I met a man who was doing neither, who simply knew things he had no business knowing and spent every waking hour making sure no one looked closely enough to ask why." Silence settled over them. Somewhere below the terrace, a child shouted something gleeful, and the sound floated up and dissolved. "He saved 14 lives that winter," Nuri went on, stating a fact she had already made peace with. "And he left before the thaw, without a word. I have always wondered what he was afraid of." Jalle held still, the stillness of a man whose armor had just caught a blade it was never designed to stop. When he spoke, something surfaced that was not quite confession, but lay adjacent to it. "There are people who watch for certain kinds of knowledge, who it clusters around, what it predicts." He stopped. He could hear that he had said more than he intended. "And if they find it," Nuri finished for him, not unkindly, "they come for more than the knowledge." "Yes," he said, barely above speaking. She nodded once and turned back to the cloud sea, reaching up to touch the persimmon tree. Not performing anything, only touching something real. "I will not ask again. But I want you to know this village has been watched before. We have survived it. And the people who helped us survive it are the ones who decided eventually that we were worth the cost of being known." She went inside. The door did not close completely, and light spilled through the gap. Jalle stood alone in the persimmon light and breathed. Once, twice, a small figure on a ledge above the world, surrounded by clouds that had nowhere to fall. Down in the dyer's lane on the lower tier, indigo dripped blue-black from hanging cloth into stone channels carved for exactly that purpose. Lanterns were being lit one by one. Tomo Ashiveld crouched behind a dyeing barrel with a piece of charcoal and a scrap of scavenged rice paper, drawing with enormous concentration while a cat watched him from a windowsill with professional disdain. Ocean Vereth rounded the corner with the careful momentum of a tall man navigating a space built for shorter people, and nearly stepped on him. "Shh," Tomo whispered, as though the barrel required it. "He's doing it again." "Who is doing what again?" Ossian asked with the weariness of a man used to ambush by small persons. "And why are we crouching?" "Jalle." He talked to the cloud woman who sells the wool wrapping. "Look, he is fixing her scale." Ossian looked. Half visible in the lantern gap between 2 buildings, Jalle crouched beside a merchant's stall, unaware of being observed. The elderly wool seller watched him work. He said something, and the woman laughed, genuinely surprised into it. The scale balanced. He checked it twice, then showed her how to check it herself. When he stood, she pressed a small packet of dried mochi into his hand, and he shook his head, and she insisted, and he accepted it with both hands, bowing. "He never keeps the things they give him," Tomo murmured, and there was in his voice now less the eagerness of a boy who wanted to impress than the attention of someone learning to see. "He always bows like that, both hands." "You have been cataloging this," Ossian said, surprised into honesty. Tomo held up the rice paper scrap. dense with a child's notations mixed among real observations. You said to watch the cloud banks for pressure change. I am watching. He is a pressure change. Ossian was quiet a moment. He looked at the scrap, then at the boy with an expression he had not arrived with. That is a very precise way to put it. Do you think he knows we watch? I think he knows everything in his approximate vicinity, Ossian said, more honest than he had planned. I think he chooses what to notice. Down the lane, Jalle turned. For one moment, he was looking directly toward them. Then he looked up at the rising moons instead and walked the other way. He noticed and chose not to notice, Tomo whispered, delighted, a child confirming a theorem. That is very advanced. Yes, Ossian said, to himself as much as to the boy. It is. At the back of the village records house, in a lantern-lit room of low shelves packed with rolled census cloth and dye-sealed ledgers, Nuri Toumachi sat with ink-stained fingers and did not write. Her tea had gone cold beside her. She stared at a notation in the margin of a crop yield map that had not been there that morning. 3 lines in a neat, compressed hand. She had been looking at it for 7 minutes. It corrected the southeastern yield estimate. The original figure had been wrong. She had known it was wrong and had simply not yet found time to recalculate. He had recalculated it, and without the census rolls she relied upon, which meant he had done it from the grain store walkthrough he was not supposed to be conducting. She picked up her pen, then set it down again. He was not performing generosity. That was the part that kept sitting wrong. A man performing generosity made sure you saw him do it. A man performing competence signed his name. He was doing neither. He was simply correcting things that were broken because they were broken, because it apparently cost him nothing not to mention it. She looked at the correction once more, and her control slipped by exactly 1 degree. I wonder, she thought, what he has had to lose for it to cost him nothing. She closed the ledger and drank her cold tea anyway. In the tidy room, the corner of that notation, just visible at the page's edge, was the only thing not where she had put it. By night, the headwoman's house glowed warm. A low table held 4 clay bowls of rice and a central dish of braised root vegetables with dried fish, and paper lanterns hung from the beam at differing heights. Nuri ladled, Sora arranged bowls with practiced efficiency. Tomo sat already and fidgeted. The 4th bowl waited unclaimed. The door opened, and Jalle stood in the frame, genuinely uncertain whether he was expected, reading the room the way he read everything. "You are the last one," Nuri said warmly, making nothing of it, which was itself the thing it made. "Sit down before Tomo eats your portion." "I was waiting," Tomo protested, his mouth already full. "You were calculating whether you could finish it before he arrived," Sora said, flat and fond. "The math was not in my favor," Tomo allowed. Jalle folded himself to the floor at the 4th bowl with the care of someone trying to occupy exactly the right amount of space. Not less than invited, not more than welcome. He looked at the bowl, then the table, then at Nuri. "Thank you for this," he said quietly, meaning it. "Eat while it is warm," she answered, receiving his gratitude without swallowing it. "Tomo, do not! I was reaching for the—" "You were not," said Sora and Nuri at once. Tomo subsided. Jalle made a sound just at the edge of a laugh, and the boy caught it and grinned enormously. They ate. The badly played stringed instrument continued somewhere outside. The moons moved, and beneath the island the cloud sea rolled in silence. "The eastern survey path has subsidence," Ossian said conversationally, not looking up from his bowl. 3 meters of it at the bend near the anchor cedar. Someone should mark it before the morning foot traffic. "I will add it to the—" Sora began. "I can mark it tonight," Jalle said, still not looking up, simple and almost accidental. "I know the cedar." He said it the way a person says, "I will get more water." Reflex, no bit in it at all. Sora looked at him. He was only eating. She looked back at her bowl. There it is again, she thought, the anomaly file opening by 1 page, and then she protected the moment by not examining it. "Take a lantern," she said. Nuri refilled the rice. Tomo stole a piece of dried fish while everyone watched Jalle, and Ossian saw him do it and said nothing at all. The most profound act of complicity the evening would contain. For a moment, they were only 4 pairs of hands and 4 steaming bowls in a cramped, lantern-warm room that smelled of braised root and wood and salt, the light making halos until it seemed almost a painting, and then the moment let itself go. Later on the northern slope, a single swinging lantern lit the narrow survey path. The anchor cedar rose enormous there, its roots gripping the island's stone edge as though arguing with gravity, and below it the cloud sea lay silver dark beneath the full moons. Jalle drove the marking stake, tested it, and tied a strip of yellow cloth—he had carried yellow cloth—around its neck. Then he sat back on his heels and looked out at the clouds, a lone figure dwarfed by the impossible sky. She said he thought that the people who helped them survive were the ones who decided they were worth the cost of being known. The wind moved. A distant bell sounded from another island, a trade ship signaling its position. "I know what it costs," came the older voice beneath his thoughts, the voice of a wound several years deep and still speaking. "I have counted it. I know exactly what it costs." He reached into his coat and drew out the packet of dried mochi the wool seller had pressed on him. He had been carrying it all this while. He looked at it a long moment, then ate one piece, slowly, watching the clouds see. She was not afraid of me, he thought. Even after. She refilled my bowl. Footsteps came along the path. He did not tense. He had heard them from the first step. "I thought you might want a second lantern," Ossian called ahead, making no pretense that this was accidental. He settled beside Jalle on the cedar root with the ease of a man who had made a small, irreversible decision and was waiting to see who noticed. He held his notebook, but did not open it. "You catalogued the substance in your survey report," Jalle said, looking out at the clouds, requiring nothing. And the two of them sat together at the edge of the world, beneath 2 moons and a sky that had nowhere to fall, while the bell rang once more across the silver dark.